So tonight it is all about the budget. Finance Minister Fayval Williams opened up the Budget Debates 2025 this afternoon. It was about a 3-hour speech. I'm glad that she made it through because the voice was sounding kind of hoarse a little bit at the beginning. And I feel like it was a difficult time getting through 3 hours. I know for me, after 3 hours, my voice starts giving out and I lose energy. I don't know how they do those marathon 4-hour, 5-hour speeches in Parliament. And for her first time, I'm just glad that she made it through the entire thing. Now, she is scheduled to join us here on this program tonight, but I did know that we were taking a risk booking the finance minister for the night of the opening of the budget debates, because she also has another engagement that she had to attend right after her debate. And I knew with the voice issue as well that it was iffy, even though she did confirm. So we are going to hope that she's able to join us a little bit later on tonight. But in the meantime, we do have highlights from that budget presentation. And for those of you who watched it or who listened to the presentation, let me know in the comments what was the most significant thing that she announced to you. What were you expecting to hear? What were you hoping to hear that maybe you did or didn't hear? I want to know your thoughts about the budget presentation as well. Now, for me, things that we always look out for are what are they going to do about taxes? That's number one. I've been covering budget debates in both Jamaica and Belize for about 20 years now. And the number one thing we always listen out for, taxes. And traditionally, we have listened out for, oh gosh, what are they going to raise now? But for the past, I think it's 7 or 8 years now, we've had no new taxes in Jamaica. And for the past few years, we've actually had tax givebacks. So of course, when we got to that part of the budget where the finance minister was talking about the revenue measures, our ears were cocked to hear what is she going to announce. We've started to get used to tax givebacks. And of course, PAYE, income tax, has been a very hot topic under this JLP administration ever since their 2016 campaign. If you recall, that was one of the things that got them elected, that promise to raise the income tax threshold to $1.5 million. At the time, the income tax threshold was something like $700,000. So they essentially doubled the income tax threshold, which at the time, many people said couldn't be done. To double the income tax threshold was a pretty big deal. And they came in, they did it. I remember covering that entire situation as well and pressuring the then opposition spokesman on finance, Audley Shaw, about how they planned to pay for it. I think it cost something like $10 billion, if I remember correctly. And it was giving people back money in their pockets, or at least that's what promise was. And so there was a lot of excitement and a lot of focus on this move from indirect taxes, which is something like your PAYE, your income tax, to direct taxes, GCT, which is considered to be a lot easier to collect because everybody has to pay it. When you go to the supermarket, you have to pay your GCT, but it's kind of easy to dodge income tax, especially for people who are employed under contracts. They may not self-report the income that they earn. And so a lot of people actually don't pay income tax. A lot of people dodge income tax. A lot of companies hire people as contractors and don't report income tax, therefore don't collect and don't pay forward income tax. And so there's been this move under the JLP administration for the past 10 years to kind of to raise the threshold and reduce the number of people who actually pay income tax. And they started in 2017, raising that income tax threshold to $1.5 million. Last year, they raised it again to $1.7 million, meaning everybody who earns up to 1.7 million Jamaican dollars does not pay income tax. And now, today, we heard Finance Minister Fayval Williams making this announcement.
This government will increase the threshold to $2 million. However, colleagues, remember, we are a responsible government. And so we'll increase the threshold in 3 tranches to 1.8, then 1.9, then 2 million over a 3-year period starting April 1, 2025.
All right, so that was the last of the announcements that she made in her budget presentation. And as they always say, save the best for last. I'm sure that's one that came with a very high level of anticipation. And as a matter of fact, when she said, and we come now to PAYE, I was like, are they finally going to do it? Are they finally going to completely abolish PAYE, which is something that many people have been calling for, because the argument is that only a few people are left on the payroll, on the tax roll for that particular tax for PAYE. The finance minister, however, did note that it's more than we think. She mentioned that there are about 650,000 Jamaicans who are still paying PAYE. I did not hear any specifics as to how many people will be left, what the impact of this will be, how much that is going to cost to remove all of these people from the tax roll for PAYE. I did do some calculations because I was like, okay, how much is this going to save me? If this means I have to pay less taxes, how much less? And it works out to about $25,000 a year less. So you'd be saving $25,000 on your tax bill, which is about $2,000 a month in the first year. So that's the raise from the 1.7 to the 1.8. So it's not a whole heap of money, but it's something. How much patty that can buy. It's a little something, and depending on how much you make it, it may make a bigger difference to some people than to others. And at the end of the 3 years, cumulatively, it would be $6,000 a month that you would be getting back into your pockets. $75,000 over the course of a year, which is a little bit more significant, because if you think about it, that can pay your car insurance, for example, if you're thinking about it on an annual basis, depending on the type of car you drive. That represents a bill, and a decent sized bill as well. So at the end of the 3 years, when we're done with all 3 tranches, you'll be saving $6,000 a month, $75,000 a year. In this first year, you'll be getting back $2,000 a month, $25,000 a year on your PAYE. I was hoping that they would abolish it, and also because it is an election year. And so I was expecting a lot more goodies. But we also know traditionally that in the budget presentations, the goodie bag comes from the Prime Minister. So next week, Tuesday, is when we're expecting to see, all the things that they are planning to do, all the give backs, all the social programs, welfare projects, education, spending on roads. And the finance minister did hint that the Prime Minister makes plans to say quite a bit about roads, which is one of the hot issues in Jamaica all the time. You see people protesting. Many times it is about roads. But on the issue of taxes, PAYE was one that we were looking out for. Another one that was a pretty big announcement as well was GCT on electricity. Here's what she said.
Today, Madam Speaker, we are pleased to announce that the commitment to reduce the GCT rate on electricity to 7% and eliminate the 150 kilowatt threshold for postpaid residential consumers is on track for implementation by the JPS starting on May 1, 2025.
So GCT on your electricity bill is going down to 7%. Another move that we applaud, which should make electricity a little bit cheaper for all of us. There was also an announcement about what is going to be done to improve access to legal electricity for a lot of Jamaicans who currently are not on the formal JPS grid, who thief light quote unquote. And so there is this program that is going to be implemented. The government is dedicating $1 billion to helping people become regularized with their light. They're launching this prepaid program. There already is a prepaid program, but under this $1 billion program, they're going to be assisting the first 20,000 people who sign up with, they're going to be paying $4,000 of your prepaid light bill. They're going to be helping these brand new JPS customers rewire their houses so that they can have the access. They're going to be doing the inspections for free. And so that is another significant program that I think the intention is to bring light bills down for all of us. Because remember, all these people who thief light, somebody still has to pay for it. And that somebody is us. It comes on our light bill. We end up paying for it. And so if we get 20,000 more people on the system, on the legal system, and they are now paying for light on a prepaid basis, that essentially should bring the light bill down for everybody, because now there is a more equitable base of distribution of people who are actually paying for electricity. So I thought that was a pretty big announcement from the minister as well, that program, as well as the reduction in the GCT for light bills. Now, speaking of GCT, there were a number of incentives announced for businesses as well, especially small businesses. And GCT is one of those issues. So for those of you who never run a business before, you might not know how GCT is actually collected. So as it exists right now, once your business earns more than $10 million a year, you have to register for GCT at the tax office. You have to add GCT to your prices. You have to collect that GCT from your customers, and then you have to pay GCT over to the government, to the tax office. And this can be burdensome. One, it increases your prices and it can make you a little bit less competitive, because if you're competing with somebody smaller who doesn't have to charge GCT while you have to charge GCT, it makes your product more expensive. And then you have the burden of having to collect that tax, document that tax, file GCT at TAJ, and then remit that tax over to the government. And so what they have done now, well, here's Fayval, here's Minister Williams making the announcement.
Madam Speaker, you may recall that earlier I highlighted the $2 billion that is in the upcoming budget for the DBJ for on-lending for many small businesses. In addition to that, Madam Speaker, we're also raising the GCT exemption for small businesses from $10 million to $15 million.
Right. So rather than 10 million being the threshold for you to have to collect GCT for the government, now it is 15 million. So as a small business, if you earn at least $15 million a year, you now have to collect GCT. And that means that several more businesses between that 10 and $15 million bracket are now going to be exempt from having to collect GCT, which I'm sure is a relief for those business owners. Now, what else was there for small businesses? I know there were a couple of other announcements. Let me just check my notes here. So there was the GCT exemptions. There was money being allocated to the DBJ for on-lending to small businesses. I believe she said about $2 billion as well. And now looking at some of the things for individuals. For those of you who have student loans, here's an announcement from the minister.
This government, through the Student Loan Bureau, will be offering to new students a longer repayment period of 10 years instead of the current 7 and 5 years. And the rates will remain the same, meaning the rates will not increase because the payment period has increased. We are starting with that one step, Madam Speaker.
So the repayment period for student loans is moving from 7 years to 10 years. And yes, that means that you have a longer time to repay your loan, which means you'll be in debt a little bit longer. However, it brings down your monthly payment. So it eases the burden on you. For those of you who still have student loans that you have to repay, or you're co-signed for somebody, you have children who are about to take on or currently have student loan debt, it means that it's going to be a little bit easier for them to make those payments when they enter the workforce and they're struggling to, a large chunk of their salary is going towards student loans. It's going to make things a little bit easier. In addition to that, you'll have things like the extra $2,000 from the PAYE tax threshold increase. That should make things a little bit easier for them as well. Now let's look at another measure that is aimed at those in society who can't afford insurance. Here's another announcement from the minister.
New fiscal year, we will bring to Parliament legislation for microinsurance. Madam Speaker, not every Jamaican can afford the premiums for traditional insurance sold here in Jamaica, and so we have to meet the people where they are. Madam Speaker, microinsurance legislation has been talked about, but I give my commitment that microinsurance legislation will be passed in this new fiscal year.
I thought that was a good move as well. And she got even more specific than that. She said it could cost as little as $250 a month. This is Jamaican dollars, guys. $250 Jamaican dollars a month to be insured for up to $500,000, up to $500,000 microinsurance. Looking forward to hearing more of the details on that, who will be eligible, who will be offering it, and how people can actually get insured under this particular scheme. Is it the government that's going to be running it? Is it going to be through the private sector and a special scheme that is maybe subsidized by the government? Because 250 Jamaican dollars really is, how much money that's less than $2 US. It's 150 to 1. So it's like $1.70 US a month for insurance. Microinsurance is what they're actually calling it. Now let's look at some of the measures aimed at our viewers, our people, the money makers, right? Our investors, our business people. There were a couple of announcements that absolutely stood out. One was the establishment of a micro stock exchange.
Pleased to announce its acceptance of the Jamaica Stock Exchange's proposal to establish a JSE micro market.
So that's the establishment of a micro stock exchange for the Jamaica Stock Exchange. I was very surprised to hear this one. I was trying to find a clip, but I'm almost sure I remember her predecessor, Dr. Nigel Clark. It might have been a personal conversation. I don't remember if it was public, but I'm almost sure I remember him being opposed to the establishment of a micro stock exchange. And that's something that I wanted to question the minister about if and when she comes on tonight, or perhaps next week, or whenever we get a chance to speak with the finance minister, this concept of the micro stock exchange. She said that it would be targeted at companies between 10 million and 50 million Jamaican dollars. As we know, the junior market currently targets companies between 50 million up to 500 million, and that is now being expanded to 750 million. And so the micro now, that's companies like in my size. Money Media falls into that range, 10 to 50 million. And I'm wondering how that is going to work. She did say that they have several, I think she said the JSE has about 250 SMEs, MSMEs that fall into this category that are ready to participate in a micro stock exchange where they would be able to raise between 10 and 50 million Jamaican dollars on a micro market. But I'm thinking about, the requirements of listing on a market, even on the junior market. You have to have your audited financials, for example. How feasible is that for companies at that level? Because I'm thinking my business falls in that level. For me to have to go hire an auditor to do audited financials every 3 months, when you think about the listing costs as well, I'm sure that that's going to be reduced, because we didn't hear any details. And as a matter of fact, she did say that they are only now just beginning to start to work on it. So what has been done so far is that they have approved the idea. So they've said yes to the idea. Yes, this is something we want to pursue. And so now the next step is to form these working groups to examine how are we going to do it? What are, the things that are going to be required? And all of these things. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of input that will be needed over these next couple of years as they draft legislation around having a micro market, if legislation is needed, as they put in the policies that are going to be needed. How do we nurture this very specific group of people without making it too onerous for them to want to list? Because micro 10 to 50 million, when you think about the listing fees, all the expenses that companies have to go through in order to be eligible to list on even the junior market, I don't know that that is feasible for companies at the micro level. So I'm very curious to see how that plays out. Now, for those of you who are abroad, and I know we have a lot of Jamaicans abroad. I saw you guys in the chat, those in TCI, those in all over the United States, all over the UK, all over Canada, and all around the world. Dividends are an issue. Taxes on dividends, because those of you who are abroad, non-residents, as they call it as she called it in the speech, you get taxed at a different rate than residents. And also, if you have a company that is, it could be a Jamaican owned company, but you have registered it in a different country for tax purposes, you also get taxed at a different rate than residents. So this is what the finance minister announced about that.
We've had a difference in the tax rate on dividends for resident companies and individuals, so which is 15%, and for non-resident companies and non-resident individuals, it is 33 and a third and 25% respectively. We are pleased, Madam Speaker, to announce that there will be one rate for resident and non-resident companies and individuals of 15%. I want to say to Jamaicans, when you hear non-resident companies and non-resident individuals, don't immediately think foreign companies or foreign individuals. They may also be companies registered abroad that are owned by Jamaicans. There are also Jamaican individuals who live abroad in countries that have lower dividend rates, that receive dividends from Jamaican companies. This benefit is one way to say to those Jamaicans who have companies abroad in jurisdictions with lower dividend tax rate than what currently prevails. We are saying to them, we are lowering the rate for you. Bring your capital back to Jamaica.
So that is going to benefit our Jamaicans overseas, non-residents who invest in the Jamaica Stock Exchange, for example. You are currently taxed at 25% on dividends. The rest of us who do live here, we're taxed at 15%. That's going down to 15% for you too. So those of you who are abroad and you invest back home, more money in your pocket, which is something that I'm sure we'll all be excited about, or at least you would be excited about, because it directly affects you. You know, dividends are taxed at source. So when you get your check or when you get your direct deposit, the government has already taken out their piece. And so a bigger piece is going to be going right back to you into your pocket. Now, I'm going to take some comments before we take the break. I'm still hopeful that at some point we can get Minister Williams on to speak to her about her budget presentation. But if not, it could always be next week. Now, the beauty about this program is that we're on YouTube. And if we need to go a little bit longer than we normally go in order to wait for her, I don't mind doing it, especially on a night like tonight. So I see we have a lot of comments in the chat. Let's take some of the comments from our group. Learn, Grow, Invest says, yeah, my car insurance is about $72K annually. So great example, I guess. Sheldon says the PM will bring a lot more goodies in his budget. Raquel says, hopefully they will take up the offer. Let's see who else we have. There's a lot of comments here. Lanesra says, after them get the benefits after signing up, what would stop them from going back to stealing electricity? Nothing really to stop them, but the hope is that, this is something that you want to continue with, because you do get more reliable electricity when you are registered to the grid. You're getting it straight from the source. It's not cutting off, it's not shorting, and it's not as risky to you as well. The risk of fires, stealing electricity doesn't come risk-free. It's not, yeah. So hopefully, once they see the benefit of getting it the legal way, it's something that they continue with. Sheldon asked, did she address the broken machines at the hospitals? I don't recall hearing her addressing that specifically. She did say that they had allocated a certain amount for healthcare, of which Cornwall Hospital is getting, I think it was about $5 billion. I can't remember the exact figure. I don't remember her specifically addressing that. Orville says, a lot of people gonna get their bubbles burst. We can revisit when that time comes. What do you mean by that, Orville? Which bubble? Which bubble are these people in? And what is gonna be burst? What are you expecting? Fitara says $1 billion to help persons acquire solar panels. Another good move as well. We do want to see the country as a whole move more towards renewable energy. As a matter of fact, it wasn't long ago that we heard the Prime Minister make a very lofty announcement that we wanted to get to 50% renewable energy by 2030. That is only 5 years away, and I have not seen any significant progress towards that goal. So yeah, I would like to see a lot more done to increasing renewable energy on the island, not just at the individual level for homeowners, but contributing to the grid towards JPS as well. That should bring our electricity cost down. All right, I'm getting a note from my producer that the minister will not join us tonight. So we are going to reschedule, and hopefully she will be on next week. But that's okay, because we still have a lot to talk about. And I'm enjoying taking your comments on it as well. Lavaine says this means that you're going to pay more in interest payments, responding to the comment about SLB. So yes, they will extend the tenure. And yes, that means you're going to pay more in interest over time. But that's the trade-off that you make for having a lower monthly payment. I'm not sure if it's going to be optional. So perhaps it is that you can pay off your loan early. Then you don't necessarily have to pay those additional interest payments if you are able to make it to pay off your student loan early. But it gives those who are having difficulty making the monthly payment the option to have a lower monthly payment. Christopher says, if you are smart, this longer period to repay is good. You can put more towards the principal. Let's see who else we have. Stronglink says, but you can also set off the GCT you pay for goods and services against the GCT you collect. Yes, that's true. So for those of you who do not run businesses and you don't know how it works, when you collect GCT, you also are able to offset that against the GCT that you pay. So if you as a business buy products or services for your company that attract GCT, you can essentially write that off. So based on the GCT that you collected for the government. So you essentially don't pay GCT. You pay it, but you get it back, if you understand what I'm saying. So pros and cons towards raising the GCT threshold from $10 to $15 million for businesses.